fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today I'm going to be doing a deep read of Fritz Leiber's The Green Millennium. I've already given the publication history and my review and recommendation for you to read this book in an earlier video. If you'd like to see that, go ahead and go back a couple videos. And you can get some more information on the publication of this book. For this video, I want to really dive in deep and really consider and look at this this text. First thing I have to say, this was published in 1953 and is way ahead of its time. It is the most new wave novel I've read in the Golden Age out of all of them. It was super early, but I would have sworn it was a new wave novel. It's incredible. It really is. And one of the most interesting aspects of this novel, and where we're going to start in this deep read, is the world building. And Leiber creates an incredibly interesting future in this novel. The book takes place in the 21st century, but it all obviously is being looked at from an Eisenhower era view of what the future will be. For instance, we're still at war with Russia, and the war is sometimes cold, sometimes hot. There is mention of a World War III, so there was obviously at one point a huge war with Russia, but what that entailed is never really discussed in the book. But the world is so interesting. One of the first things that we learn is that there's this sodium mirror that has been put into space that will reflect moonlight or sunlight anywhere that it needs to, so they can have daylight in the night and so on and so forth. But yeah, everything is so different, and Leiber really took his time trying to figure out what this future world looked like. And I just want to read a couple of paragraphs to really show how hard he worked on this world. This is on page 14 of my copy. Neither the growl nor the snarl disturbed Phil. Normally he'd already have had his earplugs tucked in, his face fixed straight ahead, his eyes nervously questing for hot rods, which were known to jump curbs, but today he simply wanted to drink it all in, to see things he'd always been blind to note the anxious but apathetic expressions on the faces of the pedestrians, to sense the invisible lines of force that, like spider webs or marionette strings, joined them to the space, overflowing advertisements which ranged from the crisp "Learn to break necks" and the cute "A striptease doll all your own" to the "Why not lobotomy?" and the imaginative, tantalizing "Glamorize your figure with a sprayed-on evening dress." Plastifabric cures in a jiffy, breathes. No heat, no adhesion. Special forms flare the skirt, shape the bosom, designed by the artist right on your body. Continuing on from page 15. He reached the opposite curb, a good 5 feet ahead of a playful youth in a jalopy with a tin body like a space jeep, scribbled over with such signs as "Oh, you Venusian" and "Girls beware, escape speed 0. Effortlessly recovering his breath, Phil found himself facing an ornate cave mouth flanked with old-fashioned fluorescent posters, the largest lettering on which read, "Tonight, Juno Jones, the man-maiming Amazon versus Dwarf Zubik, the bone-crushing misogynist." I love these crazy advertisements and the way that Fritz Leiber imagines the future will think about these. And of course he has male-female wrestling, and that's what the president, who is very much about morals, back to the Eisenhower concept, is fighting against, is this male-female wrestling. This world is and it's run by, I think it's run by the government. Yeah, by the government, and then a corporation called Funtime Inc. that basically owns all other corporations. It's crazy. So there's this really bad corporation, and then the government's getting involved in everything, morally trying to decide what people can and can't do. It's insane, and really well constructed, and this world never really he never really lets up with the interestingness of this world. It reminded me at times of Idiocracy, especially with the handy machines. These are machines that basically you can get in cafes or at home or anywhere where there's a machine that gives you a hand job, and a woman on the screen will sing what's called a sex song while performing the hand job on a machine in front of her that connects to all the other machines. It's crazy, and I just can't imagine these men in cafes doing this. It reminded me of Idiocracy a ton, and just in general the kind of insanity of these future people also reminded me a little bit of Idiocracy. And this is a satire, so that made sense. But also the plot is incredible. I find that a lot of times these satires, if we look at the Futurological Congress by Stanislaw Lem as an example, you can see, to me, that feels like two novels were stitched together. The first one being a satire like this one, but that satire didn't really seem to be going anywhere. It was just kind of going in circles as a vehicle for more satire. And then when the second part of the novel occurs, the satire almost seems to leave for the incredible plot that occurs in that story. And I do think the plot of that story is a little bit better than the plot in this story. But this story, I think, is more cohesive in the sense that it tells a really good story while keeping the satire going all the way through. It's really incredible. And just to start with on this story, I think we have a suicidally depressive character in Phil who is taking sleeping pills to sleep during the day so he doesn't have to feel the emotions connected to the fact that he just lost his job to a robot, and is suddenly taken to levels of euphoria by a green cat that shows up on his windowsill. What a crazy concept to start a novel with. It's incredible. It is so cool. And we could see the cat as an analogy or as a symbol for drugs. And maybe that was what Leiber was connecting us to, but even then I don't even know if that's it. It's just about the ability to feel content and good in a world where there's overpopulation, and feeling content and good is very hard to come by. And there's suddenly this magical cat, and the journey that Phil goes on trying to keep a hold of this cat is incredible because it keeps taking it up a notch every time. And I am going to spoil this book in this deep read. So if you don't want it spoiled, go ahead and click away. Now, if you don't mind, go ahead and keep watching. At first, he loses the cat, and he goes on an adventure trying to find this cat. And at first, he meets a wrestler named Juno, who I read about earlier. Awesome character. A character that is feminine and female, but at the same time is a wrestler that can probably kick anybody's ass in this book. And they've been shooting her full of hormones that make her stronger and bigger. So her whole character is this constant fight about gender and what is feminine and what is masculine. And when Phil is with her, she's like constantly literally picking him up and carrying him around, and their genders seem to reverse, where she is the more masculine part and he is the more feminine in the relation. And she introduces us to the bad guy, who is a guy named Mo, and nobody messes with Mo. He's connected to Fun Inc., and of course Fun Inc. is running is the corporation that runs most of the United States with the government. And he gets involved in wanting this cat, and there's $10,000 reward offered for this cat, and you're like, okay, Phil's never going to get this cat. And Phil has the same reaction and goes back to his apartment and starts voyeuristically peeping on a woman across the way from him. They have these windows that they can make opaque or clear, and the woman across from him is going to make her window opaque, but it doesn't click right, and it's see-through again. This was one of the harder parts of the book, this weird voyeurism that Phil has, and its very 50s take. But while I was like, oh God, we're going to watch this guy watch a woman undress against her will or knowledge, it suddenly turns when we're introduced to another really interesting character. Her name is Didy, but we don't meet her till way later in the novel. And that is short for Aphrodite. And she is a satyr. So as she's undressing, Phil is suddenly shocked and horrified because she has hairy legs and fetlocks and hooves, and he is absolutely shocked. So we have Didy, we have Juno, and we have Phil. And then he goes to see a therapist, and the therapist is just as weird as everybody else. And he locks Phil up, obviously getting ready to put him in an insane asylum because he's talking about green cats and women satyrs. And then while he's locked up, the therapist's daughter breaks into the room that he's locked up in, and they escape together. And she becomes an important part. Her name is Mitsy, and she's kind of a rich girl who is trying to rebel, and the way she's trying to rebel is by hooking up with friends that she says are in a gang, and that are bad people to know, that nobody wants to be around. So she's trying to take Phil there, but Phil has her drop him off at the wrestling club. Anyway, eventually we also deal with a witch named Mary and her husband, and I can't remember his name, but we have this entire plot where all of them are either worshipping this cat as a return of Bast, or are trying to sell the cat for $10,000, and Phil just wants the cat. And it ends up in this climax. There's two climaxes in this story, in my opinion. The one that happens right in the middle, which is where they face off against Mo. So future Chris here, jumping in. I didn't really like how I covered the first climax in this book, so I wanted to re-record it. Phil ends up at the headquarters for Fun Times Inc. And there he breaks in with Mitsy and her gang. He breaks into Fun Inc. and he ends up on the opposite side of this two-way mirror, and he sees this conversation happen with Mo and the head of Funtime Inc. and the head of a special government agency that I think is called the Loyalty Agency or something like that. But he sees this conversation where the government is trying to get the cat from the Funtime Inc. guy, and the Funtime Inc. guy wants to give them the cat in order to stop a lawsuit that the government is going to use to completely destroy the corporation. The government, specifically the president, is trying to attack the Funtime Inc. and gain complete control. So there's this back and forth. Phil ends up getting caught, and Mitsy gets caught, and they try to use Mitsy against him because they think he knows where the cat is, which he doesn't at this point. But they have Mitsy in a garage, and there's these boys, her gang that she thought were her best friends, were in a Jeep, and they're trying to hit her. And she's very brave and stands up and jumps out of the way of the Jeep, and everybody's very impressed with Mitsy. And this is kind of why I'm re-recording this in the future, is because I wanted to talk about Mitsy for just a second. She's a really interesting character. She's obviously young. She's obviously trying to rebel, and anybody with the experience of age, we'll call it wisdom, can see teenagers rebelling, remember rebelling themselves, and know kind of what the stakes are, and how much that rebellion is really rebellion. This is an interesting question that we could talk about forever, but I just wanted to quickly talk about Mitsy for a minute. Our main character, Phil, is in love with Mitsy, and this is weird because of the age gap, but like I said, it was written in the 50s, so that aspect of it hasn't aged very well. But Phil wants to... They escape with the cat. Mitsy and Phil escape with the cat in one of the Jeeps and drive off. Mitzi's an awesome driver. She always drives and is able to shake the authorities every time. Phil wants to show her that her desire to rebel and be a part of that gang was childish. And he starts to lecture her in the Jeep. And her response, I thought, was really, really cool. So I'm going to read a quote here from page 109 on my copy of the book. "I hate you, Phil," she said intensely. "You want to see me turn to jelly." New tears spurted from the inside corners of her eyes, but her expression grew fiercer. "Carstairs, Lewin, and Buck may have tried to kill me, but at least they gave me a chance to be something. They allowed me the dignity of being hated. They didn't try to drown me in slop. I want glory," she went on in a voice that certainly should have sounded choked, except she simply wouldn't permit it. "I want my kind of glory, no matter how cheap and selfish you think it is, because it's the only thing that's shining and brave in a shoddy, cowardly world. I want to spit in the world's eye and then face it when it comes bleeding for revenge, like I face this Jeep." This, for me, so this is the end of Mitzi's character arc. She's in the rest of the book, but we don't see her as often. This, for me, was really powerful, because as much as people who've lived a long time have wisdom, the youth have this courage, and this ability to see the world's flaws without rationalizing them away, as I think we start to do as we get older. And it really shows the age gap between Phil and Mitzi's relationship, in that she is... Even if she can accept the logic of what Phil's saying, she calls it slop, and wants her to turn to jelly. She can tell that he is trying to, in a weird way, parent her by one-upping him with one-upping her with his wisdom, trying to say, hey, just so you know, all this rebellion you feel is silly. When you get older, none of it will matter at all. At which point she very eloquently states that she doesn't care. The point of the rebellion is when you're feeling that anger as a youth, as a teenager, that anger is real, and it makes you feel like you can conquer the world, and she feels like that, and she wants to try and conquer the world, even if to Phil's generation it's idiotic or worthless in the long run. And I liked the way that Leiber was able to really look at that gap and what that gap would look like between two people. So that kind of ends that first climax where Mitsy almost dies, and Phil gets the green cat back. Mitsy leaves at this point after this speech. She's like, screw you, I'm leaving. And he's sitting alone in the Jeep with the cat on his lap, feeling wonderful and perfect. And he falls asleep and wakes up, and the cat is gone. After this, he goes to a... He has this ability, Phil has this ability to be able to walk in the direction that he feels like the cat is. He just goes off of instinct. And every time he sees the cat runs up and jumps into his arms. So it's really kind of Phil's cat. So he ends up at this house of scientists that are studying ESP. And all of a sudden, all of their experiments are working wonderfully. The morning is just great, and of course that's because the cat is there. He tries to get the cat from there again. Unfortunately, the head of the loyalty department of the government shows up, and with Dora, which is this woman that we find out later is a robot, short for Pandora. I like the idea that the robot is called Pandora, and Pandora's box let all the evils into the world, and this robot is going to let all the concept of AI robot evils into the world. Very cool. But they get the cat and take off with it. No. Dora shows up, gets the cat, and they know it's going back to Mo. So eventually they end up going back, trying to get this cat from Mo, and I'm going to cut back into the old video now. But eventually Phil does end up getting the cat back, and then losing it again right after. We meet another character named Dora, who later we realize is connected to Pandora, and she turns out to be a robot. There are so many interesting characters in this, you guys. So many fun. And the Greek mythology stuff is fantastic. But anyway, after that, suddenly Mo isn't the scariest person to get the cat anymore. The U.S. government wants the cat, and the president's getting involved. And it ends in this Bacchian party that is happening because the cat is in this group with all these people that are trying to get this cat. But when the cat is able to use its hormones on people, everybody just feels great, and universal connection and love and parties, and it's absolutely incredible and often hilarious. And in the end, they're all arrested by the U.S. government, and they're brought into this room, and the president is like, okay, you've all been involved in an alien invasion. There are these cats. They're not always cats, but they look like cats that invaded this planet of people that look like satyrs, and they became symbiotic with them. And really, I think this is just Fritz Leiber thinking about cats, right? If you think about how cats evolved, they evolved to meows in order to sound like human babies crying so that we would shower them with attention and feed them. And Fritz Leiber, through the mouth of the president in the book, is like, what if... Oh, and here comes my cat now, meowing. Do you want to come up here? So the president says, now imagine if these cats actually evolved to, instead of speaking a language on a vocal level, learned to understand our emotions and to control them in order to get us to give them what they want. So they create this kind of symbiotic relationship where the cats don't think like we do, but they use us in order to make sure that they are spread and taken care of. And eventually these satyr people that were already taken over by the cats bring the cats to us. And the whole time I'm like, oh damn, like they know what's going on. This cat I thought was good, and this cat is not as good as I thought it was. And he says, the only reason we know this is because you're all feeling the effects of one right now. And a golden cat sits up off the lap of the president. And it's the cats aren't evil. They just make the humans or aliens to them feel so good that they want to take care of them. And even at the end, Phil, who is in love with Mitsy, goes to get Mitsy, but really all he wants is the green cat. And in the end, the invasion works. The cats have taken over. I love the concept of this book as a look at pets and how important pets are to us. I think it's just beautiful and absolutely incredible to have the pets win. And it even leaves you questioning, like, is this a bad deal for anybody? Right? I mean, eventually, is human technology going to allow humans to spread these alien cats to another world? If you love animals, this is a great book. If you love new wave science fiction, this is a great book, especially because it came in the 50s, way before the new wave. This is one of the weirdest, but I think it's going to be pretty high on my list of favorite books for this year that I've read. It's just really, really incredible. You could also look at the concept of the cat as a symbol for drugs. This book has kind of a hallucinatory feel to it. So I could see people making that link, that the cat is a science fiction way for Fritz Leiber to talk about drug addiction. And while I don't mind that reading, and I think you could point to textual evidence that it's there, I had more fun having the cats be actual invaders and really looking at this concept of how cats evolved and how unique cats evolved, and Fritz Leiber's take on it that way. This is a very short, deep read, but I wanted to talk about all the aspects of this book, even with plot spoiling, because I liked it so much. If you haven't read it yet, go do so. I think you'll really like it. I want to read one more quote, and this is early in the book. And I liked this because as I read it, Fritz Leiber's kind of giving the psychological state of the world, and I was just shocked by how kind of spot on I feel like he was. What other results could have been expected when American society began to overvalue, on the one hand, security, censorship, and imagined world-saving idealism and self-sacrifice in war, and on the other hand, insatiable hunger for possessions, fiercely competitive aggressiveness, sadistic male-belligerence, contempt for parents and the state, and a fantastically stimulated sexuality? That seems really, when I read this, I felt like it could have been written today. It's really a crazy statement that Fritz Leiber has stated through the mouth of the therapist in this book, and I just found it really, really incredible. What a book. What a good time. Well worth a check. And thank you very much for watching this video. If you watched it to the end, thank you. And if you liked it, click like. If you like this kind of content, please click subscribe, because we'll be making a lot more of it in the future. Thanks for watching.